I'm delighted to be joined today by Gideon Thomas, who's the VP of Marketing and Growth of DealHub. Gideon, thank you for joining us today. Just as an interlude, I just noticed that DealHub was recognized by G2 with the Top 50 Award for Best Product for Sales. So congratulations on that. I saw that also on your LinkedIn profile the other day. So congratulations there. You must be delighted.
Thank you. We're certainly proud to have achieved that award. There's a lot of stiff competition out there in the global market, and we recognize that customer voice has certainly been an important part of this achievement.
And how long have you been around for?
The company has existed for 6 years, being born out of Israel and then opening a secondary office over in the Bay Area, and we've grown our user base, our customer base, to really be a worldwide company already.
And so how many clients do you have approximately at the moment?
Approximately, I think we're between 150 to 180 customers, ranging from companies with a couple of hundred of employees all the way up to enterprise. We certainly have a lot of companies in our portfolio who are now unicorns, quite a lot this year, which were acquired with some really outstanding achievements, and definitely some of the hottest names in tech, specifically in software, are in our customer base.
Okay. Well, we'll talk a little bit more about DealHub as we go through the conversation. But I just thought it'd be interesting to talk to you a little bit about, we're living through, quite extraordinary times at the moment, Gideon.
Mm-hmm.
What have you learned personally over the last few weeks?
Absolutely. So I definitely, as a marketing leader, I've definitely decided to take a step back rather than trying to act first. So to kind of take the listening approach to marketing. I've seen that specifically on social channels, organic channels, that a lot of people have been following each other. Probably 90% are producing similar content. I think a lot of people don't have a defined playbook for how to deal with situations like this, and they've been trying to muddle through that together. So we've tried to position ourselves kind of on the other end of the same spectrum, which is if everybody is doing that thing, then let's try and be different. And I think from a starting point, I think the key kind of phrase I would lead with would be empathy marketing, which is to understand the humanness in all of this, to try and maybe take a step back from leading with brand and start leading with thought leadership, human to human. And then identify with, the different stages of grief, which is kind of a really good marketing methodology in all of this, which is shock, why is this happening to me, to anger and frustration, why is this happening now, this is really inconvenient, and it's very painful thing to go through, to perhaps a little bit of disbelief and despondency, to kind of the next stage beyond that, which is I'm now ready to do something. I'm not perfect, but I know I can be doing more. I know I can be doing more right now, and then the kind of the further progressions of that. So I see the content trending that way. I see messaging trending that way, and I see the appetite from the wider audience moving that way too. That we see that general trend working its way through, and some green shoots are already coming through right now, which is really positive. And obviously the great way to validate all of this is through organic content, where people give their feedback, comments, and all the rest of it, where you can see something authentic. It tells you so much more, and I would say organic first and paid acquisition second. Yeah. Rather than banking and projecting what you think people want to hear, and then of course you can alienate your brand by doing things that way.
Yeah, and linked to that, actually, Gideon, there's obviously been a lot of talk, and we've obviously spoken about it before. A lot of talk about whether or not it's the right time to sell, and what your company's position should be. What's your take on that, and what have you perhaps heard from your clients who are obviously involved in selling their solutions?
So yeah, from obviously one part of our solution is a price quotation solution. So we see a lot of the transactional nature of companies, and there is a huge appetite for people to be sending out price quotes. I think the nature of how is more interesting to you than the what. So how people are doing that now is people are proactively being flexible and dynamic with pricing. Pricing approval workflows, they need that immediacy. They need to be able to do things quickly on the fly. And some of the bureaucracy of enterprise kind of approval processes have had to be overcome. People have had to be nimble, is a popular term over in the UK, or agile, maybe in the US. So definitely being responsive with all of that. And sometimes you might be selling, I've heard this as well from sales operations leaders, you're selling, but perhaps your audience has slightly changed. You're not completely sure who you're selling to. That's changed, but you're still selling. So sell differently. Yeah, so I hope that helps. That's something I've definitely seen. And I think when it comes to a marketing perspective on the same piece, I would say that buyer intent still remains. So buyer intent signals from whether that be from review sites or tools like Clearbid or whatever your preferred buyer intent tool is. You'll see that with search, Google organic, Google paid ads will still kind of reach out to those bottom of the funnel buyer intent search queries. And then you have the whole block of people on places like social media, like for example, LinkedIn, of course, is a great channel, and others where the intent has changed. People that you could approach a few weeks ago to push your product, you cannot do that to now. And you need to respect that, and you need to move your mindset to brand positioning and not on straight acquisition. And as a consequence of not making that shift and adjustment, firstly, from an ROI point of view, you're going to burn through tons of budget because people are not ready to buy right now. And secondly, you don't have permission to do that. If people are in this place of distress and you're proactively trying to sell something that they're not ready to purchase, you're only going to alienate yourself. You're only going to come out on the other side of this alienating yourself as a brand and being several steps behind. So definitely you want to continue to market, but market intelligently. So move, pivot and do a lot more on content. People are looking to be led through this, right? So the how to, the what to do, all of that, they're looking for leaders to come out and make leadership statements, not manage situations, but be a leader. Tell them how you're going to bring value. Tell them what you're learning. Tell them what value you can bring to them, all of the above, and help to guide people through this situation. And wherever possible, best case scenario, do something that doesn't immediately benefit yourself as a brand or even as a thought leader. Think about how you can add more value to the people who are just vulnerable right now, even in the world of business. I'm thinking within the context of business, there's people that need help without being able to give something transactionally in return.
Yeah. So let's just talk a little bit about DealHub and with particular reference to ABM. As
Yep.
you know, the ABM account-based marketing is becoming more and more popular. Many companies are looking to implement it as part of their go-to-market strategy.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see DealHub helping companies to do better ABM?
Right. So first of all, to understand what DealHub is that deal stack that's taken together all of these separate sales stages and brought them into one. So we create a personalized website from seller to buyer that has brought everything together, everything from sales content, personalized sales content, to contract management, contract redlining, price quotation, the margin discount that goes in there, the SOW, the e-signature, the terms and conditions, and maybe even a know your customer form for collecting the billing information, et cetera, et cetera. So we've brought that all together, and essentially what I'm saying there is you're delivering a sales proposal which is personalized from buyer to seller, it's contained and safe, and that buyer can share that with the stakeholder committee and share the same story at the same moment in time. So you have essentially one source of truth consolidated in one location. So that's on the closing the deal side of things. How does that match up or marry up with account-based marketing? It's not two journeys, it's one journey for a buyer. It's kind of from lead to close. It's one buyer journey, it's one customer experience. And what they're hoping for, let's put it from a buyer point of view, is they're hoping for that responsiveness, personalization, consistency, to be concise with the information, to be relevant with the information at every stage in the journey with your brand from kind of lead to close. And if that experience transitions at the halfway mark from marketing to sales and changes into a whole different experience, of course, that's where you're going to have drop off and revenue leakage. So, the ultimate brand experience is the one that's consistent from one end to the other.
Yeah. And you mentioned there actually, Gideon, personalization. Talk a little bit about that in particular, obviously with ABM, not so much of the one-to-many stage, but much more the one-to-few and the one-to-one. Personalization is key for any effective ABM program. Or how would you see DealHub facilitating that?
So absolutely. I mean, for DealHub, it's very easy because the qualification information has already been inputted to the CRM. So you already know, for example, the job role, you'll know the vertical, you'll know the size of company, the industry, maybe even the currency that they're selling in, whatever kind of qualification questions have been asked. And then with DealHub themselves, we just read that information down. So the proposal that goes out has to factor all of that. So for example, in an ABS world, you're not sending out the same top of the funnel content that you captured the lead with way earlier in the journey. No, by this point, you know what industry they're in. So maybe you're sending out a case study which says, I understand your use case. You're not alone. There's others like you. This is how we support them. And here it is in something that's readily available to you, so that you as a buyer know that I've listened and I'm reciprocating back to you that my solution is relevant to you and you are not taking a risk.
And with regards to DealHub and Deal Room, which is also one of your solutions there,
Mhm.
how do you see that as kind of enabling better sales? And particularly at the moment, obviously, sales teams, SDRs, account executives, everyone is now working remotely.
Right.
How do you see that facilitating and helping to do a better sales process and close?
Yeah, I mean, by its very nature, so I love the term remote sales, first of all, because remote sales could be inside sales, but it also could be field sales where you've had the meeting in person, wherever it may be, in the bar, on the golf course, at the ball game, if you're in the States, and then you want to send the follow-up action. You're still going to send that probably digitally. There's going to be email going out, and you want to make that the most memorable and positive and timely experience possible, so that you can just reinforce your professionalism. People always say that we live in an experience economy. Since companies like Amazon have hyper personalized everything in B2C, in B2B we expect the same experience economy, even though it's B2B and not B2C. That's our expectation. So the deal room of making everything easier to digest in one location is just the most contextually relevant way to acknowledge that in B2B.
And going back to that point about everyone now working remotely, how have you seen that impacting your clients?
That's a broader question, and I would say that some companies are more ready for that. I live, for example, and work now in Israel, where working remotely is completely part of the DNA. So it was more like just a change of gears from one week to the other. Our leadership can function this way. The whole of our team can function this way at the drop of a hat. I know for other organizations, perhaps bigger organizations in further afield, that it was more of a change management process where maybe they didn't have the tools or systems in place. They weren't ready for that. It was more of a shock to the system. And there's a whole calibration phase, not a business as usual phase. For us, we're completely enabled to work as usual. I think the question that begs is, what will everybody take from this when the virus COVID-19 is over and things return to normal? I think from this point onwards, everybody needs to have this kind of workflow enabled so that we are ready for everything. We found personally that our productivity has increased by at least 30%. Open offices and all of that kind of stuff can be quite noisy. Time spent in traveling can be time without an ROI. There are a lot of immediate benefits, and obviously the reduction in overhead costs, with utilities and rental spaces and all of that are obviously reduced this way. So yeah, we always need to be ready to do this, and it definitely does. It is the right way to scale sales teams. So you can have your in-house inside sales team, and that's good for certain stages of business growth. But eventually, when you want to do bigger deals, you want to do them face to face, when you want to be selling across different global territories, it's not always efficient to open a physical office in every location. Sometimes you just need to get the best salesperson available to cover that region and to support them, to enable them, as a remote sales professional.
Yeah, and going back to talking about marketing and DealHub, how do you see your marketing strategy? How has it changed in light of the current circumstances?
Right. So I touched on it before. So we reduced media spend. We pivoted less from acquisition and more onto content, thought leadership, brand positioning. And we've made the investment in perhaps different types of content than we historically have done before. We've gone deeper into video. We've seen massive and positive ROI from that. And we've also increased our creative process. So Declan, you probably would have seen that in recent weeks, we've really doubled down on creating net new content for organic, for thought leadership, and we've committed to doing a net new piece every single day of the week. That is very time consuming, labor intensive, and something as a marketing leader you wouldn't naturally think of as a starting point, because you'd think, how do I scale that? But what we've seen as we've looked at the numbers is that organic content shared through thought leaders, through people, has up to an 800% uplift than content shared through brand. And of course, there is at times like this, you're looking for authenticity, more than anything else. So if I'm able to share it as a person and you have questions, you're going to feel more comfortable that there's an address for that question than if it's coming through the company site. More so than that, you can also see what the other type of social permissions for other questions that have been asked. Posting the first question is always the hardest. Whoever comes second and third feels a lot more enabled by seeing the tone of the conversation. And sometimes that means I need to be a little bit more informal as a marketeer so that I'm more approachable in that context.
So obviously, I see a lot of your content on LinkedIn, but are there other channels that you guys are finding or working well for you at the moment?
Sure. So I touched on video. So of course, video has a play on LinkedIn, but likewise, it has a play on YouTube, which is an amazing channel, a relatively less competitive channel than kind of Google search. Essentially, when you make the investment in video, you probably can get return on it through LinkedIn organic, LinkedIn page, YouTube, Google search. You can embed it into your website. You can embed it into your content assets, your blog posts, whatever else, your resource library. So massive ROI for that initial investment. Other channels, I mean, I know what the trends are saying. So the trends are saying that Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest are all peaking right now massively in comparison. We haven't made a big pivot to those channels because I'm already starting to see that the green shoots are coming out and people are starting to return to normal. So I think once that happens, people will start go back to the channels which are familiar to them. So I don't see. I think there's unique times in life where you can actually gain ground in a channel maybe where you're a little bit further behind than the bigger players. For example, LinkedIn. And this was that moment. So rather than pivoting to something which was completely new and doing it from zero to 100 in 3 to 5 weeks, we decided to go deeper in what we know rather than trying to experiment. I didn't feel that this was the right time to experiment when there are constraints on budgets and everything else.
Yeah, and you've mentioned a couple of times green shoots. Finally, kind of a last question for you. How do you see, we're now into almost April's almost over, entering May very shortly. How do you see now the rest of the year for DealHub?
Well, the good news is in the last days and weeks, we've been closing really, really big, significant deals. So it's not just something that's theoretical. I'm seeing people and customers putting their money where their mouth is. And I think there's always a need for, or capacity for need to have products as opposed to want to have products. And for example, one of our core products is our CPQ solution, pricing solution, and our contract management solution. Even if you're working with a reduced workforce, your need for accuracy on closing deals and contract management and your terms and conditions will not go away. People will not want to leak revenue throughout the rest of the year. There are certain verticals which are actually improving, right now. So, for example, supply chain are going through a boom. Obviously, the food and manufacturing related to food is going through a huge boom right now. Telecoms, communications going through a big boom right now. The tech industry as a whole is always buoyant above others whenever there's kind of an economic downturn. They're always the one to invest in. There's enough meat there. There's enough substance there in the marketplace whereby people still want to improve. And actually all it is a litmus test. Some people have been prepared to stick with their legacy stack for a while now because it gave them job security. Right now, there's a real litmus test to say, actually, I'm willing to consider change because there's a compelling need to get things to a higher degree of accuracy.
Interesting. Gideon, thank you very much. Lovely to speak to you again, and it's fascinating to learn more about DealHub. and the things that you're doing at the moment. Thank you for your time today.
Pleasure. Thank you, Declan.